By 1847, a British railway clerk had made more money on paper than the nation's largest factories produced in a year. None of it was real. London, September 1845. The morning papers announced a new railway proposal almost every dawn, not the completion of old lines, new ones, hundreds of them. Speculators had begun to see Britain not as a nation of roads and canals, but as a blank canvas for iron rails. Within months, over 600 new railway companies filed for authorization. The total capital they claimed to need, roughly equal to the entire annual budget of the Crown. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind. The 1830s had seen genuine railway success. The Liverpool-Manchester line, completed in 1830, had proven the technology worked. Investors who'd bought shares early made fortunes, real money, real dividends. The lesson wasn't lost on anyone with capital to deploy. But the 1840s were different. Early investors had made their millions. Now came the speculators, men who had no intention of building railways. They wanted to buy shares cheap, watch the price rise on rumor and hype, then sell before the line was ever laid. The mechanism was simple: propose a railway, publish a prospectus, watch amateur investors, clerks, widows, small tradesmen scramble to buy in. The shares didn't require full payment upfront. Investors paid a deposit, often just 5 or 10% of face value. The rest would come later, in installments, as construction proceeded. This meant a clerk earning £200 a year could claim ownership of £5,000 in railway stock. On paper, the leverage was staggering. Between 1844 and 1846, the frenzy accelerated. A shopkeeper in Manchester could discuss railway prospects with the same authority as a Bank of England director. Coffee houses filled with men trading shares on rumors. A proposed line from nowhere to nowhere could double in price in a week if the right name, a lord, a general, was attached as chairman. The names mattered. George Hudson, the Lord Mayor of York, became a railway magnate by promoting lines he barely understood. He was charming, he was visible, investors trusted him. By 1845, Hudson controlled or influenced over 1,000 miles of railway. His net worth was estimated in the millions. He'd arrived in York as a modest merchant. Within years, he lived like a prince. But Hudson was just one symptom. The real engine of the mania was information asymmetry. A railway promoter could claim a line would be profitable without ever surveying the route. Engineers' estimates were routinely inflated. Competing lines promised service to the same towns, guaranteeing that most would fail. Nobody enforced disclosure. The prospectus was theater. By late 1845, over £100 million in railway capital had been authorized by Parliament. That was roughly 10% of Britain's entire national wealth. Most of it didn't exist yet. It was promised. It was projected. It was speculation dressed as infrastructure. The Bank of England began to worry. Interest rates were rising. The pound was weakening. Money was flowing out of productive enterprise and into railway shares. In 1846, the bank tightened credit. It was a slow squeeze, but it was enough. Speculators who'd planned to sell at peak prices suddenly found fewer buyers. The collapse came in 1847, not all at once. In stages, share prices that had tripled in 2 years fell by half, then fell again. Investors who'd bought on margin were wiped out. A clerk who'd put down £50 on a £500 share saw his deposit vanish and received a bill for the remainder. He owed money he'd never possessed. George Hudson's empire crumbled. Audits revealed he'd misappropriated funds. He'd used shareholder money to pay dividends, a circular scheme to keep the illusion alive. He fled York in disgrace. He died in poverty years later, his name erased from public memory. But here's what matters. The railways got built anyway. The lines that made sense, the ones with real demand, survived the crash and eventually operated profitably. The mania had been destructive. It had ruined individuals. It had created a generation of cautious investors, but it had also accelerated infrastructure development by a decade or more. Parliament responded with regulation. The Railway Act of 1844 required deposit of survey plans and proof of land purchase before authorization. Later acts tightened requirements further. It wasn't perfect. Fraud still happened, but the worst excesses became harder to execute. The broader lesson was harder to absorb. Markets reward confidence. Confidence attracts capital, but confidence divorced from reality is just noise amplified. The 1840s taught Britain that. It taught investors that. But it's a lesson every generation has to learn again, because the mechanism never really changes, only the asset class. The 1840s Railway Mania built a nation's infrastructure and broke thousands of fortunes. The same lines that ruined speculators connected Britain's industrial centers for the next century. The same men who lost everything had, in aggregate, funded something real. The moral isn't that speculation is evil. It's that speculation has consequences that outlive the speculators. Subscribe for more financial collapses and the men who engineered them. Each week, a new reckoning.